Good afternoon. My name is Chris Drozdowski. I'm with Origin Lab Technical Support. I'll be hosting this afternoon's session on NetCDF import, matrix analysis, and graphing. Before we get started, a couple things. If you have any questions or comments, I urge you to use either the chat or the Q&A window. That's the best way to communicate. We'll try to address your questions and comments. If we can't address them immediately, we'll address them at the end of the presentation. Also, at the end of the presentation, we will have a brief poll. We would really like you to take the time to fill it out. It helps us develop our content and helps us understand what you want, what you'd like to see. All right, let's start out, talk a bit, just a brief minute about NetCDF. It is a file format. It's a hierarchical file format. It's especially popular in the climate sciences because it can store large quantities of data very efficiently, both writing and reading. We've had NetCDF support in Origin for a while, but starting with our latest version, 2021B, we've really improved it. In fact, we almost started from the ground up, completely redoing it, and I'll be using Origin 2021B today to show you the features. So let's get started. Let's go to our first topic, importing NetCDF data. And before I import, I want to talk about the data container we're going to be using. It's a matrix book. If you're familiar with Origin, you're obviously familiar with workbooks. A matrix book is very similar. It's like that Excel workbook. Origin's workbook is like an Excel workbook, and a matrix book is very similar. It has the metaphor of a book and sheets, but rather than having columns in a worksheet, a matrix has one or more evenly spaced matrices. And think of it like a stack. You've got in a worksheet a stack of matrices. That's what we're going to be working with. That's what we're going to bring our NetCDF data in as. So to get started, we're going to go to the data menu. With the matrix book active, we're going to go to the data menu, connect to file, NetCDF. And I'm going to select a file. It's a sea surface temperature data file from the year 1854 to 2020 is monthly data. I'll select it to open. Now, the first thing we encounter is a data connector browser. This lets us look at that hierarchy in that file. And what we're interested in these multi-dimensional variables. In this file, I have two. I have this SST, which is the sea surface temperature data, and I have the SSTA, which is anomaly data. We can tell the dimensionality of these variables. The file has variables, that's what we'll call it. Based on the blue here, we have a latitude, elevation, and longitude variables. They're single dimensional. Then we have this SST, the sea surface temperature variable. It is multi-dimensional. It actually has 4 dimensions, of which we're going to bring in 3. Now, when we click on these variables, starting at the highest level of the file, we get to look at the properties that get assigned to that level, the attributes. And NetCDF files allow you to maintain a large, almost arbitrary number of attributes about the file, citation values. There are technical things about empty data fill values, et cetera, and that extends down to the variable level. But it's the very simplest to bring in one of these 3-dimensional variables. We'll select it, come down and choose select data for import, and just click OK. And Origin is going to import the data. It's going to take a few moments. There's a lot of data there. It's got to build that stack of matrices up in that matrix sheet. And then it's got to convert, it's going to convert them from data to more of an image-like view of the data. So the first thing you may notice is actually the data is upside down, and we're going to correct that in just a minute. But let me take you through and show you a little bit of the features. We brought in this monthly data from that 1854 all the way to 2020, and we can navigate it with the slider here. It'll take us through, it'll take us through, it'll take us through. So we have this slider. We also have a mini browser type control panel on the left side. From here we can, again, look at these attributes. We can look at other variables. We can, even if we want to, as long as we have another multidimensional variable, we could import this. I could select this anomaly data, right-click, and add and connect it into this workbook. So the workbook's capable of holding multiple worksheets. Like I said, and you might have observed it, a couple other things. I said the data was upside down. Before we go any further, let me point out a couple other things. This is sea surface temperature data. That means that there's going to be no data for the land. And when Origin encounters these missing values, no data missing values, it gives it this brick red color. The actual data is this grayscale. Before we flip that data over, let me show you how we can make that a little more attractive. We can move our mouse to the top edge of this matrix stack until we get a mini toolbar, and we can specify a missing value color. It takes a moment. It's got to process a few hundred individual matrices here, changing that color. Now we've changed our missing value color, but we still kind of have this, it's not very attractive still, and all we need to do is apply a palette. Let's use a warming palette. So you can see we now have a palette. Now let's fix this data, because it's not good being upside down. I'll go to the data connector icon here. It's a little file folder with a plug in it. And I'm going to go to options to open an import options dialog to adjust our import. And I'm going to do a latitude flip. Say, okay, and Origin's going to bring that data back in. While it's doing it, we're going to cover a few different import options just to give you an idea of what is possible to do. By the way, I forgot to mention, I do have colleagues here who may help out with the Q&A, the questions. We are also recording this webinar, and we'll post it to YouTube in a few days. So back to the subject, we've now flipped our data, and let's look at one other thing. We have a 0 to 360 degree view of the data. Origin also allows you to shift longitudinally to have a more traditional minus 180 to 180 degree view. In fact, we will use that frequently. Again, and we'll go back to those options. I'm just showing you these importing options one at a time. You don't have to do them one at a time. I'm just showing you one at a time. You can combine them, and we'll show some more of them. Let's do a longitude shift. It takes a few moments, and it's re-rendering. And here we have that more traditional view. So that's the basics of importing data and the basics of the matrix container. Let's look at some more advanced importing options. And by the way, you may notice I have some notes here for myself. It just helps me along. I don't want to forget something. Let's import another file. So I'll create a blank matrix book. I'll go to Data, Connect to File, NetCDF. This time I'm going to open a air temperature, monthly mean air temperature data file. It's about 245 megabytes. I get my browser, and I'm looking through my variables. I see that in the climate type data, it seems we're always getting the latitude, longitude, and time dimensions as variables, but we'll get that third dimension, which in this case is air. So I'm going to select air, select data to import. And this time, rather than import it and go back and redo options, I am going to just go ahead and click this button to do my import options up front. And we want to select a specific date range. I want the month of July for the 1981 to 2010 climate normal period. So I can specify that. Let me do a starting date, 1981-07. There's a lot of dates here. Sometimes it takes a moment to get through them. And we're going to go to 2010, July of 2010. 2010 July. Now what we want to do, this is just going to bring month after month in because that's what is in the file. We only want July, so we can perform what's called time axis skipping. It's where we read one record and then skip a certain number of records, or we read two records. We read a certain number of records and skip a certain number of records. Because this is monthly data, we're going to read 1 month and then skip 11 months to get back to July. So we'll read July and skip a year to July. Let's take a look at, now let's go ahead and import this. I think we're gonna, I was gonna show you the subregion, but I think we're gonna stick with importing what we have. Instead of taking the time to go through the subregion, you can do subregional importing. So let me just say okay and bring that data in. Origin's crunching the data and it's brought back 1981 July, 82, 83, 84, all the way through 2010. So that's a way we can skip data while we're importing, only import targeted values. Let's just take a moment. I really hate that red color. I want to change it around, make this a little more attractive. Maybe set a palette, maybe a temperature-based palette this time. Let's look at one more import. It's one more option. I'll create a matrix book, data, connect to connect to file, NetCDF, and let me see the file. I want this, it's a precipitation file for, it's actually daily data from 2015, January 1st to 2024, 12/31. This is, I forget the exact term, but this is where you're forecasting ahead of time with the data. All right, can you import multiple books at a time? That is our first question. No, at this time you can only import one. You can only do one file at a time. My colleagues can take down these notes, these questions. I'll take that you're interested in that as a suggestion. We'll take that down. We are very much seeking input. We would love your input on this, what you think you would like to see that we haven't done, what improvements you'd like to see, what you think we may need to shift in terms of features. So we have this precipitation data, and I'll select it. PR for precipitation is our variable. We see we have actually 3,653 records. That's daily for 10 years. And I'll go to my import options, pardon me. This time, let's find where is our import options? Oh, I forgot to add the variable to import, pardon me. Now we need import options. This time, we're going to bring in all the data, but rather than skip months, all right, one other question. The example file is in the first dimension. However, there are many NetCDF files where the order of dimensions, e.g. lat long time. What will happen is that order doesn't matter, or Origin is smart enough to properly pick up latitude, longitude, and time dimensions. Right now, if we have a fourth, for example, elevation dimension, we take the first slice of that, but it doesn't matter of the order of those dimensions. Origin can pick those up. All right, so where were we? We were going to import this data. Now, what I want to do is I have this daily data over 10 years. I want to look at an aggregate mean for each day over those 10 years. So I'm going to come out with what, 365 matrices in my stack. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to enable averaging. And I have a choice of sampling. I can either do consecutive or across years. Across years is going to give me that aggregate. And I'm going to specify an interval of 1D for 1 day. Now I happen to know that I just know ahead of time I need to do the longitude shift and the latitude flip on this one. I'll click OK, and Origin's going to bring that data in. And it takes a moment. There's a fairly heavy amount of computation involved with this. All right, it's brought the data in. I have no missing values in this stack. This is precipitation data. Let's throw a palette on it. In fact, it's sort of hard to make it out since it's not land-based and it's not sea-based, so it's hard to make out the features here. But that is another example of options when importing data. Let's move on to our next topic then. Let's look at graphing. We have I'm first going to focus on something called an image plot. Later, I'll show you an additional way to do two-dimensional graphing when we extract some data from these stacks. But let's look at a basic image plot, and I need to bring one of my already imported NetCDF files over. Let's look at one that we want to use. Let's use this one. So let me just drag it over. I like to stay organized into my image plot. At the simplest level, an image plot, we'll go to the plot menu, go to the contour category, and the last one is image plot. And it's going to pull, the image plot is going to pull that missing value color and the palette from the matrix stack. We get a view, we get a color scale. We can add a title. I won't do it, but we can really customize this up, make it very attractive. But this is the very basics, and this is the important point, how easy it is to just create an image plot. Let's look at another nifty feature of, it's not actually a NetCDF feature, but it works well with these image plots. Origin allows you to now insert shapefile-based maps onto graphs. And I'm just doing a little bit of housekeeping work off screen here. Bear with me for a moment. All right, so I said, if you're not familiar with, essentially a shapefile is a file containing boundary information. Usually it's map or political boundary based information, countries, continents, etc., but not always, that's not always the case. Well, here is here is, and I fixed it up a little bit, an image plot from the air temperature data. I had shifted that longitudinally. I cleaned up the color scale. I fixed the fonts a little bit. Let's say I want to add some boundaries to this. Well, Origin ships with a few for now built-in shapefiles. So I can go to the insert menu and just choose world map. And that's going to bring a world map in. It's an outline of these countries. We have other options, and Origin is pretty good. It picks up on your bounds, your longitude and latitude bounds to know what maps to present. For example, we can bring in a map of China. One of the options we have is actually this map data, these boundaries, they're actually just a line plot on top of that image plot. We can customize it with the mini toolbar. Maybe change its color. Maybe we want a little lighter gray. Maybe we want a little white, make it a little thicker. That's not really a good color to use, but it shows you what is possible. Let me show you another example. And this builds a little bit more because we're gonna do something kind of fancy with the map. This is North America. I can come to insert and do the continental USA. And I can take this a step further. I can actually isolate within the shapefile boundary. I'll double click on my graph to open. If you're familiar with Origin, you know about the plot details dialog. This is where we go to configure everything about the plot. And I'm going to select this second, this map plot. And very simply, I'm going to come and choose fill area under curve and choose fill shapes by reverse orientation. And when I click apply, we get black. It's not attractive. You see the effect. But we'll just come back into our pattern and maybe give it a little nicer pattern, just a gray. So you can see how we started with the image plot, we added the shapefile boundaries, the built-in shapefile, and now we isolated it. Now let's look at one other example of adding maps. Origin right now, 2021B, does not have we only include 3 maps. We're waiting to find out what other maps we need to include. But that doesn't mean you are limited. If you have a shapefile, you can add the you can use the shapefile and add it as a map. I have roughly Brazil here in this image plot. And let me drag over and go to shapefiles and just drag this Brazil.shp right into Origin. And when I do, Origin imports the shapefile, which is made up of at least 2 latitude and longitude values. It's got this feature and it's got this feature ID column. The way I add a map is I simply select my X and Y column and drag and drop it right onto my image plot to get my map. Maybe I can customize it a little bit, set the color. Let's see if we can get a better color here. Color, and let me just click outside. And there we have it. We've added that outline, and we can even again very quickly come in and isolate Brazil if we want. I'll just do it very quickly so you can see. And there we go. So that's how you can use shape files to create maps on Origin graphs, and it extends to other graph types. You're just not limited to image plots. We'll use shape files again a little bit later in the presentation for a different purpose. All right, let's look at our next subject. So we've talked about importing and graphing. Let's talk about matrix operations, because we have brought the data in these matrices. I have a blank matrix book right now because I just want to enable the proper menu. Under our analysis menu, what options do we have? We can do a nonlinear matrix fit. That's going to just do one slice. That's just going to do one matrix on the whole stack. That's not really geared towards our type of data. We can do a linear fit of a matrix stack, do a linear fit of each, for lack of a better word, pixel going up through the matrix stack. We can perform descriptive statistics, which we will in a moment. For mathematics, we can inverse isn't really useful. We can do a simple math. We want to add a constant value to each item in the stack. We can perform subtraction. That's where we're going to subtract one matrix from a stack of matrices, or a stack of matrices from a stack of matrices. We'll see an example of that. There are some others. These are mainly geared towards other ways Origin matrix books are used. They're not really relevant to or germane to our discussion today. So let's look at our first analysis type, which is a descriptive statistics. And I brought back my sea surface temperature data. I have isolated it again. This time I've done that 1981 to 2010 climate normal period. We're working towards a goal here, and I brought in July only. The first thing I want to do, I want to get a mean of all of these. I want to do the mean for this stack. So I'll come to my analysis menu and choose descriptive statistics. I have many options here. The first thing we're going to do, again, if you're familiar with Origin and the whole working with operations in Origin, like statistics or fitting or whatever, we want to set our recalculate to auto. So when the original data changes, my analysis will update. Now, what do I want to compute? We have many statistics here, but I am mainly just interested in the mean. Lastly, I want to specify an output. And I think instead of, I have options here. I could put in a new sheet, or I could replace the input. We're not going to do that. I could put it in a new sheet or a new book. And I'm going to just put it in a new worksheet and say, okay, and I can see the origin, pardon me, has performed those statistics, that mean. So let me just change the name of it. So that's the basics of the statistic. Were I to actually go in and, well, let me explain. Since this sheet only contains one matrix, which is the mean. If I had chosen to do another quantity like the standard deviation, it would have given me two matrices in that stack, the mean and the standard deviation. So that's sort of how you can do statistical work, statistical evaluation of your matrix stack. Let's look at our next topic, subtraction. We're going to carry this a little bit further. I made a copy. I've worked through, of course, I worked through this webinar prior to actually hosting it, and I've previously done that mean that we just did. I brought in that climate normal period data. I did the mean on it, but I also have I have from the same data set, I have July 1920 to 2020 data. And what we're going to do is we're going to build anomalies by subtracting our mean of the climate normal period from our entire period. The way we do this is to go to the analysis menu, mathematics, and subtract. The first thing I want to do, as always, in this case, is to set my recalc to auto. Now, our subtraction is going to be A minus B, and I want to subtract that mean value from my stack of my longer range stack. So I need to hunt A, use this little button. It lets me use my mouse to specify an input. For A, I need to choose this stack here. For B, I need to choose my mean data. And where are our results? Where is A minus B going to go? Let's go to a new workbook. And for the last thing I want to do is I want to subtract I want to tell Origin, you're going to, which matrix in B are we going to subtract from A? The active one, the first, the same one, all. If we had if we had the same number of sheets in each matrix sheet, we could subtract them all from each other, but we're only subtracting one from a stack, so we're going to choose the active matrix in B and click OK. Origin's doing that subtraction, and now we have the subtracted data. Let me throw a palette onto it, and we can see these are our anomalies. Let me rename that sheet. All right, that's how we go through a subtraction. Do we have any questions, comments? Okay. Well, we're going to use this anomaly data a little bit later on in our next subject, which is going to be ROI, Region of Interest Operations in Origin. Let's take a look. I have from 1950 to 2017 July. I have some data. It's the air. It's a monthly mean air temperature. Let me again. You know what? Let's just go. Let's not put a color palette on it. Let's just leave it gray. It's fairly clear what it is. We can isolate specific parts of this matrix stack for further analysis by using what's called a region of interest. Our region of interest is a rectangle tool. I'll click the tool and come somewhere on my graph. Let me just choose an arbitrary location. An origin will draw a red box on it. We could actually have different shapes. Instead of a rectangle, we could have a circle. It'll take a moment to update. Let's see if it does. Yes, it'll replace it with a circle. We have a polygon tool I won't show you, but I will show you a region tool. For example, maybe we want to come over and isolate Japan. We could isolate Japan and have a region of interest. But let's come back and do a rectangular one. Bear a minute, we got some auto saving going on. And let's just set our rectangular ROI smack dab in the middle of the United States. When I right click on the ROI, I have a menu. I could choose to crop this matrix down to that. I don't like to do that. I could choose to copy the data. Copying and pasting positions we'll look at in a moment. I could save this ROI for future. We had a customer request this because they wanted to reuse the same ROI in multiple imports. And I could bring it back in by importing it. We'll cover this in a minute, creating ROI from XY. And our last two things are we can create a new matrix of just this ROI. We can extract it as XYZ if you want XYZ data. And lastly, we can generate what we call an intensity profile. This is what we're going to do. This is the most important thing in this menu. When I click intensity profile, I get a dialog. Again, my recalculate this time is auto for me. And the idea is we're going to perform some kind of statistics within that ROI down that whole matrix stack. It's going to generate a time series for us. So let's do mean and standard deviation. And click OK. Origin does the calculation. This time it generates for us a workbook of this time series. Some interesting facts. We have a name of, you can give the ROI a name, and I'll do that in a moment. We get its coordinates, and then we get our time dimension and the statistics for that time dimension. And we can do something like maybe create a line plot from this. Just an example, let's go ahead and maybe just take a second to customize it. Maybe red, make the line a little thicker. Come in and turn our error bars from standard deviation into a ribbon. And I can further customize and further customize this. The neat thing about this ROI and the intensity profile being on the auto recalculate is as I move the ROI, my graph updates. The statistics are run again from within that ROI. I did not, let's come in and scale the graph. Now, an interesting feature, let me come down here too and just park this in Brazil and rescale my graph. I can actually add a second ROI, or I can add as many ROIs as I want to this. And the way I do that is I first have to rename this one. So let's just call this ROI 1. Everything gets updated. Now I can come in and just put an ROI down in the middle of Africa. Double click and let's just give it ROI 2. Create an intensity profile time series. And let's just throw a graph on here. Again, I can customize it. Maybe I'll just take a moment. I can't resist. And now I could say, let's look at another new feature in Origin. We're going to take these graphs and we're going to merge graphs to a layout. So now we have two graphs. The layout is a live reflection on the graphs that created it. The graphs that created it are based on our time series intensity profile. So as we move each of our ROIs, our graph should update. And it's not for, yes, it is. It just takes a moment. Let me rescale. Oh, wait, we got to rescale on the graphs. Pardon me. That's a brand new feature. But they'll update. Let me just bring these graphs here. As we update the graphs, move the ROI about, we get an update, et cetera, et cetera. And I could have set these axes to be automatic. I just didn't. And it would all be automatic. But that's one use of the ROI. Now let's look at a different use for that intensity profile. Let me minimize all of this out of the way. And we'll come back to our anomalies that we just created. I'm going to make an anomaly plot from this actually. So I'm going to add an ROI, and this is sea surface temperature data, not land data. I'm going to add an ROI. And I happen to know that there's some issues with sea surface temperatures off the east coast of the United States. So I'm going to add the ROI to that area. I will right-click in the ROI and create an intensity profile. This time I just need the mean and click OK. And I have already created ahead of time a graph template in my template library for an ROI anomaly plot. So let me go ahead and create it. Now, as I move my ROI around, we can see that our anomaly plot has not only updated itself, but I've added information about the latitude and longitude range to the graph. We can move it around, see the effect. There's some areas up here where we see a dramatic effect being displayed. So that's how we can go from an original one file to all the way to an interactive anomaly plot. All right. Let's look at some other features related. We're back to shape files because we've talked about shape files and I showed you how to import it. But we can also have shape files as regions of interest. Let me come back to adding maps, and I am just going to move this Brazil shapefile workbook over to the shapefile as ROI folder. For the image plot, we dragged and dropped the data onto the plot. But for our matrix stack, we don't do that. We right click and we're going to choose create ROI from XY. We get a little dialog. I need to hunt down, I need to find my coordinates. So I use my hunt button to select the X and Y columns from the Brazil shapefile workbook. I need an index column, and that's going to be the feature ID. For now, we can ignore the ROI name. We'll see that in use in a minute. And when I click OK, I now have an ROI shaped after that Brazil shapefile. Let me zoom in a little bit. I can right click and I get all my ROI options. Let's create new. We'll look at a new one. All objects. We'll create a new Brazil only matrix stack. Like I said, we can apply a palette to this, maybe a warming palette. Okay, let me zoom back out. And I'm going to show you we'll take the shape file as ROI one step further. Let me clear out that Brazil ROI. We can actually bring in a shape file with multiple boundaries. For example, let me find it. Let me open my window here. Pardon me. And I'll make this a little smaller. I have a continents shapefile, continents.shp. I'll drag and drop it into Origin to import it. Now I'm going to add every continent as its own ROI to this matrix stack. So I right click, choose create ROI from XY. For my coordinates, it's like my Brazil, I just choose my X and Y columns. For the index, I'm going to choose that feature ID column. This time I have a column for the continent names, so I can give names to my ROIs. And when I click OK, we can see that each continent has a red ROI box. We can select an individual ROI and act on it. But there's a neat trick hidden inside here. We can select a single ROI. Let's do Africa. Right click and choose intensity profile to get a time series for Africa. And we can actually use all ROIs on the matrix for this intensity profile. So let's do mean and standard deviation. Now Origin has pulled out that same time series, but it's done it for every one of the continents, every one of these shapefile ROIs. Let's take this a step further and create a browser plot from the worksheet. A browser plot is a type of graph that lets you it's for data exploration. It lets you look at data. First thing let's do is customize the graph a little bit. Let's change that to a ribbon. Let's make this a little bit bigger, the actual plot. Make it a little bit thicker. All right, so one of the features of a browser plot is it gives us this control panel on the left, this navigator, and it lets us navigate the data behind the browser plot, which happens to be all those columns in the worksheet. Now, all I'm seeing here is mean. That's the long name, not very useful. So I'm going to change it over to show ROI and to hide mean. Now I can navigate each continent. Let me set it to auto rescale Y only. So as I navigate the continents, I can see my trend over time. And that is working with shape files as ROIs. All right. We're going to start to wrap things up soon. We're going to show one more segment on making a video. All right, making a video. I've got a matrix stack. It is the monthly air temperature data. This time what I've done is I imported it to be seasonal. We got spring, summer, fall, winter, over and over again from 2007 to 2010 years worth of, actually that's 11 years, I think, worth of seasons. I just want to make a quick video of this effect here. It's kind of nifty. I'll go to File, Export, Video. And I've got some options. I can export it as an animated GIF, a stack of TIFFs, an AV file. We're working on MP4. We're working on that to support it. I can give a frame per second. Maybe let's do 1 frame per second. Let Origin choose a file name. We'll go to our user files folder and say OK. It should tell me, yes, it's been exported. So let me open my user files folder. It is off screen. Let me get at it. And let's play it. Consecutive seasonal. And we can see as origin went through that matrix stack from the bottom, the earliest, to the top, the latest time data, and we created a video. Thank you. So someone commented, nice ROI functionality. Thank you very much. We worked very hard on that. All right. As you can see, our video is still chugging away. I'll let it finish. It's just got a few more seconds left. All right. So let's review what we looked at today. We looked at very basic importing and how we can fix missing value color and add a palette to our matrix stack, and how we can shift it longitudinally and flip it latitudinally. We looked at different importing options, date axis skipping, and averaging aggregate date and creating aggregate averages. We looked at image plots. We looked at adding maps, both built-in and shapefile-based. I missed the browser graph segment here, but I did show you one later. Matrix operation. We talked about descriptive statistics. We brought that mean of that climate normal period in. Subtraction. We generated anomalies by subtracting that mean from a larger set of data. For our ROI operations, we showed single and multiple ROIs. We showed that you could have different ROI shapes. I showed you how to create an interactive anomaly plot, carrying on that same story. We looked at shape files, both single shape and multiple shape, for ROIs, including, and this is where we included our browser plot. Lastly, we looked at how we can make a quick video from a stack of matrices. So that's going to begin to wrap up our presentation today. Feel free to ask questions. Please fill out our poll. That really helps us a lot. I hope you liked what you've seen. This is a work in progress. We want to improve it. We want feedback. We want to know what you would like to see. We got a lot of feedback from a climate scientist during our beta development stage, and we welcome it from other people as well. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And I'm going to leave the poll open for a couple more minutes, but have a nice afternoon.